Hello there, Unlearners, and welcome to this episode of the Unlearners podcast. Thank you so much for your time, taking this time to be part of this conversation and to engage with us. Whether you're watching this or you're listening in on this, I really want you to bring a notebook close by. So if you're one of those people like me who takes notes on everything, I'd like to encourage that you take some notes today, because we want to make this particular episode as practical as is possible, very much like we do with all of our episodes. True to our theme for the entire season, we are talking still about reimagining or rethinking education. But specifically today, we're going to look at corporate education. We're going to look at education for us professionals within the working environment. So if you're in L&D, if you're in HR, I really want you to lean in, because this is your conversation. If you're not within those two spaces, it doesn't matter. You will still find something valuable to practice, to think about, to ponder in today's conversation. So we've brought in someone who literally lives, breathes, eats, sleeps, all of this type of thing. So we have for you today, and right at the beginning, guys, before we actually started shooting, we were talking about Iana Consulting and just the name, Andisa. And I was just saying how profound it is. And I think the beautiful thing about being able to birth an initiative, an organization, is that it gets to live through a vision. So it is almost embedded in a vision. So can you tell us a little bit more about that as you sort of introduce yourself and as you say hi to the amazing Andisa Kumalo, who has joined us from Iana Consulting?
The Unlearners. Learn, change. Learn, change. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow.
Amazing. Well, hello, Unlearners. Very happy to be here. Before I get into I think who I am, and maybe just the pretext to that is your question around my consulting company called Iana. So Iana is extrapolated from the name Iana Imvola Nintsekelelo zikaThixo. In English, loosely translated, it is raining and pouring with God's greatest blessings. And I chose that name and anchored it because I'd given birth to a child who sadly departed, and in the spirit of I think remembering her and I think honoring her spirit, I wanted my company to kind of represent that. It's an extension of who I am. I get to raise her incredible two brothers. And so I didn't want, I think, her story to get lost in the shuffle of life. And so it's great that I can open a laptop and I can see her name. I can, type a letter, I can type a proposal, and her name lives and breathes in everything that I do.
Love that. And then just the meaning of the name as well gets to permeate through everything you do. That constant just being gifted, being in grace of some sort. I think just that for me is really, really profound.
It's, I think her loss might be a physical loss, but I think it also birthed something deeper and more profound in me. I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. I think entrepreneurship happened by way of serendipity. It was life. I leaned into it. And so I wasn't those people who had the big bang dream. I think I pride myself in having created a life and charted a space in my life where I move through the waves of life at my own pace.
I like that.
And so entrepreneurship was just one of those things where I was just in a different season of life and I leaned into it. But if I were to expand on that, who is Andisa? Andisa is a catalyst, a connector, and a storyteller. I love the art of new things and starting new projects. I like connecting the dots. I think in my circle of friends, she knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a girl who knows a girl.
Oh, I love those people.
So I've got a very colorful black book. I could probably pick up the phone and make a couple of things happen with a couple of phone calls. So learned that when I started journalism is always be I think keep people but keep also people who are meaningful for you in different seasons, and also bid farewell to those who don't serve you well in different seasons as well. And I enjoyed the art of storytelling. I mean, I think there's so much power in being able to use your words for impact.
One of the titles that I got introduced to about you, Andisa, is learning strategist.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really beautiful. And thinking about what you said around either being a connector or Malcolm Gladwell says you've got connectors and you've got mavens. So the connector is the one that connects you with the people, but the maven is the one that connects you with information. And saying you should read this article. Hey, there's this book, there's this thing. So for me, learning, and I want to find out if it's been similar for you, learning is about that tapestry and being able to join dots between seemingly contrary information, because someone could sit with you and go, oh, I'm looking for this person in engineering. And because they've boxed you into a space, they don't think you know a person who knows a person who knows a person. But behind that is this beautiful tapestry of different sort of pieces of information and connections. And that for me is I've found in our journey at the Unlearners is where true learning happens, is when there's a curiosity around different pieces of information, different spaces, different knowledge bases. What have you found in your work? Something similar?
So I think personally, if I were to just take a step back, so I'm a ferocious reader. I'm less of a person who watches TV. Once in a while, I'll get into like a good series, but by and large, I mean, I'm getting through 2-3 books a month. So I've always been that from a young age. I was a library monitor, etc. So it's grown up with me, and so I pride myself when I say I'm also an information and attention economist. So I like the puff and pass of information, so I'll read an article and I'll randomly think, I think Uzane would love this. So I'm that person who would likely flood your WhatsApp with articles and links than memes. So you're not getting any funny memes from me whatsoever. Very rare. But I will likely go, hey, like I was reading like this new white paper from Oxford. Hey, like EY has just released like a thing. I just think it's fascinating. I know it's a bit of a reader, but like take your time, here's the link. So I'm that person. So I appreciate, I think, alternative learning. And maybe because of that, my ascension in my career has been very unorthodox, because I didn't follow the traditional HR route, because my affinity to learning didn't mimic an Oxford or rather a rigid way of taking it step by step, but I kind of reversed engineer the process. Which is quite alternative, and people often don't know what to do with me. And like when I was in corporate, so like we don't quite know what to, so I kind of fall in that box of outliers. And it's a beautiful space, and I don't think we talk enough about how do we tap into the outliers, because often they are the ones who are more, I think open to change quicker. So the waves of change quick, happen. The outliers are probably the first one to dive headfirst in and ask questions later. And so folks like us tend to learn by doing, not learn necessarily by imitating.
So let's actually jump right into the conversation and talk a little bit about where our learning programs within organizations are going wrong. Because we've titled this episode Death by PowerPoint. It's a hugely used, probably overused now phrase. But I think it brings across that point of just the ongoing, non-stop, recurring being shut down by learning and not designing learning programs or learning opportunities or journeys that really speak to our people and speak to what we know about learning in today's world. So from what you've done and what you are currently doing, what are you finding are some of the things that are just not working with how a lot of organizations are doing learning?
I think the rigidity to concepts relative to the problems we're solving as an organization is probably the first step where things go wrong.
Okay.
I think we all have a collective understanding that technology and the wave of technology is accelerating what we should be learning, how fast we should be, processing and computing information, and therefore ultimately problem solving for organizations. The challenge is that we're doing so we essentially are flying the aircraft as we're building it. And that's a muscle school doesn't teach you, right? School by and large teaches you we're going to give you information, you're going to regurgitate that information, and then we're going to stress test your comprehension of what we've given you, by and large, right? Like that's a concept of schooling. It evolves slightly, I think. I think the more senior it becomes, right? But I mean that construct is around problem solving, right? So we're going to give you a case study. We want you to use the application of what we've taught you to apply to the case study, and then essentially mirror back what you think you've learned between your comprehension and understanding and what we've taught you. Either way, it's in that same realm. And where we are with corporates is that we're solving problems because there's macroeconomic and geopolitical issues that are all hitting us, right, at the speed of light. There isn't a blueprint for a lot of the problems that we're solving for. Our only saving grace, and I've been saying a lot to clients of mine and leaders, is that the best out of class leaders we're going to see in the next 10 years will be the leaders who have worked in projects or in assignments that are tech adjacent. So whether you are actually in technology is an immaterial fact, but your ability to understand where the tech is going and to learn what I call techlish, right? So what is the tech English? So in order for us to solve these things, it's not only incumbent of the CIO or the CTO to come and present a tech solution. What is our understanding as executives? And so the more we capacitate ourselves with techlish, and techlish right now is evolving again, right? Which is why, you're not going to have an AI expert for 20 years. They might have 20 years in technology, not necessarily as an AI expert. And so we're learning these skills as life is evolving, as the complexity of the problems is either becoming more nuanced or more geographically nuanced or more universally nuanced, et cetera, et cetera. So depending on what industry you're in. And so I do think that learning has evolved a lot out of, I think, the more traditional construct. And the question we have to ask ourselves, what do we want to learn and what is learning for purpose meaning? So do we just want to cough up 300,000 for an MBA and for people to go and get an MBA, but when they do, what does that mean for the organization? Has that refined their problem solving skills? Are they bringing in-house, new expertise and knowledge we didn't already have? So these are pertinent questions if we're talking about, particularly I think, executive education outside of the traditional construct. So what is the actual ROI? ROI for the individual, so how do we place them in an environment that, stretches their capacity, but how does that in turn benefit them and grow them in their professional development? And I'm not entirely sure, and if I'm being very honest, that there's quite a silver bullet yet. I think there's a couple of levers that can be pulled here and there, depending who the individual is, where they're at in their career, the level of seniority, their expertise,
the organization,
and the organization. So I would almost argue, I think the organizations who are doing really well are the ones who have built in an internal apprenticeship, knowing where they are, knowing the markets that they're operating, knowing who they're competing against. I mean, good example is DBS Bank from Singapore, right? 10 years ago, sorry, I digress, but this is going to come full circle.
Ahead.
10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, and it's one of the case studies we're all almost referenced to around digital transformation. They have a new CEO, he comes in and he says, look, we're a great bank, but I want us to be a best-in-class bank. So what does he do? He goes and in his quest to almost take down and strip off the bank of these, structures, right, that exist within the banking system. He says, I want every business vertical to operate like your own little tech company. And so exactly the way a Google and Amazon and a Meta works, I want to create these pods of institutional knowledge that we have to harness that. And for us to then go, we're not going to outsource all of the tech solving. We're going to bring that stuff in-house. And we saw DBS Bank over a period of 5 years going from being a recently decent bank in East Asia to winning the best global bank in the world 5 years in a row, because he changed the way people solve problems, knowing that that kind of skill set doesn't necessarily exist in the market. So how do we galvanize and aggregate the data that we have in our organization, but then how do we move away from federated structures, which by and large financial services companies tend, I mean, the construct is that, right? Like they operate in federated structures. And so what he did was really flip the script and going, we're going to act like a tech company, but we're a bank. And what that did is that he then saw over time that people who didn't necessarily have access to certain portfolios and certain banking products purchasing and making different buying decisions. And so now you are, the unintended consequence, and maybe intended, is changing what is a customer profile, right? So the benchmark for what a customer profile was previously to how now when you have behavioral economics come into play, you then have a better understanding. So it goes back to my statement, and it might be controversial for some, that the next best in class leaders would be the leaders who have worked in tech adjacent projects. Because you tap into an alternative way of thinking, or at least you encourage that sort of ecosystem within an organization. I know that was a very long-winded response to the question,
No,
but
it's okay.
I wanted to bring color to it.
Yeah, I think you did answer the question and more, because what I was going to ask then is, what should leaders be thinking about at the moment as they build some of their programs, as they're building their platforms, as they're thinking about the future of learning? And I think what I've gotten from it is that approach of going from tech for tech's sake to understanding what we're trying to build, what are the key trends that we are tracking, and how are they going to then inform the talent dynamics that will then speak to that, the skill dynamics that will then speak to that, and then building from there. Because at the end of the day, as you'll know, tech literally is just a tool for us to leverage to support systems, to support policies, to support learning. But if we do tech for tech's sake, and I think that this is where, from our experience at the Unlearners, we've seen a lot of organizations do, is to bring in the tech and then go, okay, so how do I use this? Instead of going, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? And then how does tech help to accelerate? Is there a technology that helps us to work with this particular output that we're trying to drive? Then you bring it in. That way, and I think you started so beautifully on this when we started the discussion, is then it's purpose directed, then it's purpose centered. That way you see a huge acceleration because you understand exactly what you're trying to get out of it. So I think for me, what you said tied in so beautifully with that it makes so much sense when organizations think about it that way.
It really is, I think, about tapping into alternative thinking. And I mean, it's no different. I've got 2 NPOs. One is a newer project that's keeping me up at night for all the good reasons. So I'm glad.
Okay.
I'm glad. But, you know, like 6-7 years ago when I worked at a tech company, and, you know, and for my own selfish reasons, I was the HR director, there weren't enough female representation across the color line. So for me, I didn't care what it was, right? Whether black, Indian, white, you know, there just weren't enough representation of technical aptitude of women. And what we had set out to do with my 2 other co-founders when we created Women's Tech Connection was again, not to reinvent the wheel, right? Like there were things in the ecosystem that were just operating in these weird silos. And all we did was, for 18 months, we engineered things that were already in the system and then packaged it differently.
Okay.
And as a result, we were able to produce, you know, CCIE is an acronym used in tech, but essentially it is the upper echelon of a skill set in that environment of women, and yes, some of them black, which of course from an EE perspective is important. But for me, it was a very women-driven, purpose-led exercise. The CCIE certification was cited by the Department of Labor, one of the scarce skills in the country. And so from being an active citizen and then coupling that with my expertise, how do we look at where we are? Because I'm not leaving South Africa, I'll tell you.
Okay.
I'm not leaving. I'm deeply rooted in, I think, the magic of what makes us us. And we've gotten a few things wrong along the ways, but I think there's always opportunities to reverse engineer. And what it is just, it takes will from all of us to collectively go, okay, what are we going to do to change that? Okay. And I think no different to the current project I'm working on now. I've got two other partners, and again, sure, it's on the surface, it's a tech platform. But below the surface is we're building something that is going to help with the high unemployment rate of youth. I've got 2 teenagers, so I've got a vested interest. Wow. So I've got a dog in this fight, right?
Yes.
I have a dog in this fight. I've got 2 teenagers. One's about to go to university. Okay. And I shudder when, you drive past, robots, and you've got young kids who have graduated, they've got their masters, cum laude, et cetera, but the job market isn't able to absorb them. Yeah. And so we have to actively talk about the cognitive dissonance between also educational institutions and the labor market. Yeah. And there's a massive gap. And I don't think there's enough intentional conversations for us to have to bridge that gap. So either sides of this is battling, right? You've got the educators going, we've done the best that we could. We've released these youngsters into the world. You guys are in HR or wherever. You should be absorbing them. And, and folks are like, oh, da-da-da-da, right? There's a laundry list of they're this, they're not, they're this, they're not this. And so there's something in the middle, there's something in the vacuum. And we don't have the luxury as a country and I think as citizens and as leaders to turn a blind eye and to not continue to build either platforms, ecosystems, communities that help to agitate this as quick as possible. Like our GDP, to population ratio is alarmingly scary. And it's alarmingly scary, and it's the sort of thing that should keep all of us up at night because we all feel the brunt of it, right? Through tax, VAT, etc., etc. And so this is a thing that's impacting all of us. And so it's things like that, I think, for me that, like keep me up at night, and I go, okay, so how can we reframe learning? What conversations can I be having with my colleagues in HR around this particular issue, right? There's millions of, young people who are unemployed. How can we make them employable, right? Where are we channeling all of that energy? How can we improve our absorption rate? Because where it is now, it's disturbing. And I think more of us should be building platforms. And so while I may have an affinity to tech, I'm heavily reliant on my two partners who are the techies, but I'm the brains behind the people aspect of it and going, hey, these are the things we need to think about. When people are hiring, this is where they're looking. These are the skill set. This is how they are vetting, so let's create maybe an alternative framework to vetting candidates. How can we improve this? How can we get this to move quicker? And the quicker this moves, the better the country becomes. But anyways, this is just my soapbox conversation.
I can tell how passionate you are, hey? Because you are just all in with this stuff. And you speak with so much passion. I think that's what we need. And you use the word agitation. And this is what we've been speaking about the entire season, is how do we agitate the system to a point of change? Because sometimes that's what stimulates, especially a huge cataclysmic change like what we need at the moment. It is that constant agitation. And with the educational space, you do have all of these different stakeholders that are playing a role. So specifically today, we're having the conversation about, the corporate, the work environment and designing learning programs there. But there's this huge, like you were saying, there's this huge influx of young people who have come in, and not just young people, they're not all young, but these individuals that are coming into the workplace who themselves have created these mental models about what learning is and isn't. And so they're bringing all of that into the work environment and they're going, I want to tick these boxes. So where I want to go next is to understand how you have perceived the view between, one, the learning journey of the individual as far as it supports the individual, and two, the learning journey of the individual as far as it supports the organization. Because what we hear a lot, and we do this very similar type of work, what we hear a lot is, my learning journey at this company seems to be very focused towards the organization and the organization's goal, which makes sense in a particular perspective. But also there is what ends up becoming a very low usage of a lot of organizational learning platforms. Zanele, we've got all of them on Udemy, but oh my goodness, 40%, the rest of them just don't care. And this is the thing. I want to know what you think about. This is one example that I've seen specifically within Unilever. So they have something that they call a purpose plan, where each individual comes into the organization and they have this plan created by themselves, and then they collaborate with the line manager to say, as I start my journey at Unilever, this is what I see my personal purpose as, and here's how I see the organization playing a role in that. And then what a line manager, they'll sort of talk you through that journey of saying, here's how it fits within the organization. If you see yourself moving into tech maybe in the next 30 years, here's what I can introduce you to within Unilever, or what you can start doing now. And I'm thinking, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, is having a learning plan of some sort and introducing something like that, where people come into an organization and they go, here's where I see myself in 30 years. And here's what I think will be an appropriate learning plan for me. And they co-create with the line manager, with the leader, with the manager around that learning plan, whether it's micro learning, it's blended learning, and all these other sorts of things. Have you seen something similar done? critical thinking, emotional intelligence, effective communication, prioritization, and stress management. Imagine if your team had a dedicated, well-experienced facilitator to walk them through how to build these very, very hard soft skills. Because at the end of the day, if you run a small or medium-sized business, you know the hard truth about soft skills. That yes, it's one thing to be technically competent at what we do, to know exactly what to do, but it's a completely different thing when our team has the capacity to communicate effectively with each other, can collaborate flawlessly across their different silos to make things happen. And that's why at the Unlearners, we designed the Soft Skills 101 program, specifically for all of the small to medium-sized businesses that come through to us and go, oh, our teams need to unlearn. They're not communicating well. They're not effectively communicating. All of these other types of soft skills. We've got a list of 12 key skills that our facilitators are trained to be able to support your small and medium-sized business with. What are your thoughts on something like that?
I mean, I definitely think there's a shift towards that. I always advocate, I'm a big fan of learning labs. And I think creating learning labs and pathways that maybe sometimes speak to roles, not necessarily individuals. And it's a bit of a controversial take. And the reason for that is we underestimate how much people evolve the more they are given access and proximity to see things. Many companies I've worked at, I'll walk in as one thing and then I'll leave and going, geez, like my next role, I want to be this. And that's purely because I was given enough access and proximity to new information that I found myself questioning, you know, am I going the direction of something already prescribed? Do I stick with it or do I pivot? And so I'm a big fan, I think, of creating, you know, these learning pathways. Some of them, I think, need to be by function. So irrespective of who the individual is. Right? So if we say in this business vertical, you know, we're going to create 15, you know, learning pathways. And if you wanted to be a Zanele and an Andisa or a whoever else, right? Likely, you know, if you follow parts of this blueprint, right? Like that's the job halfway done. Of course, I think there's always going to be need, I think, for people to explore their personal interests. I mean, I got introduced, you know, to ESG before it became like fashionable and popular, way back in the day. And I was like, oh, like this is really interesting. I'd love to explore this. Not for anything else, but for my own personal growth and development. And so it's great that it's now come full circle, you know, and you know, and now 10 years later, now I get to be a consultant and I do like other stuff. And so I think it's marrying those two worlds, but I think being open to the fact that people should be allowed to pivot. And so, you know, and it goes back, I can't remember who said it, but I mean, there's a saying that, you know, you should be allowed to change your mind when you're presented with new information. And I don't think that should be any different in the workplace. I think if someone meets a colleague they've never met and they're in a meeting and it strikes a chord and they go, whoa, I didn't realize that, you know, like at X bank, we've got, a bunch of behavior, economists that work adjacent to the HR function. I mean, what is that even? Well, like, what does that mean? And all of a sudden, now you no longer aspire to maybe be an HR BP or an L&D expert. You're going, okay, maybe anthropology is something to explore. You know, I've never thought of anthropology as, as a way of understanding human behavior. You know, like what else is there that's in the world? And so I think we have to be now a lot more open to the possibilities of magic. I think people are like, we have so much access to so much information all the time. Right? You know, whether it's on social media platforms we're on or, extensions and networks, and people change their minds all the time. And so the life cycle of roles is getting shorter and shorter. And so the life cycle of learning is equally getting shorter and shorter, which is, I think, why the concept of, like micro-learning became, just a lot more like attainable, because you can kind of, acquire what you need to in 6 months versus 3 years. And then you can decide, okay, do I really want to be, a digital social manager? But you know what? I've learned enough about SOE and, paid marketing and all of the crucial things I can implement if I were to go and apply for a social media manager role today. But also, if then I wanted to pivot and become a project manager in the digital team, so how can I take those skills and then make that pivot? And so I think we have to settle our energies around the fact that there isn't a silver bullet. And I think the waves, we're going to get different iterations of it for quite some time. And I'm conscious that leaders also have a lot of change fatigue, right? So they'll have experts like us come in and, prescribe something, and then 2 years from now, the world is in a different place. And fortunately or unfortunately, that's just sort of where we're at. And so I think it's also around building agility and adaptability to all of that change, despite the change fatigue.
Yeah, I was actually going to say exactly that's what I'm hearing from you, is into the systems, into the programs, build that flexibility into it, and that room that accommodates the rate of change that we're currently going through. And also the shorter learning spans, like you say, whether attention spans, but also just the shorter life cycle of skills.
Shorter learning sprints.
Exactly.
So I think, creating that environment. And again, I mean, the jobs of the future are being created right now, today, right? We don't know in 5 years' time there's going to be a whole influx of new roles, highly likely, and I think we all know that. Their naming conventions might be different, and we might not be acutely aware of them today. But by and large, where the world is shifting and changing, 5 years from now, we're going to see another wave of naming conventions and definition of roles and functions and responsibilities, etc., etc. And so we might as well embrace the change now as part of the learning, gravitating towards the uncertainty of the future, because we really are in that space of having to accept so much uncertainty. And so there's a lot less certainty on a lot of things. I mean, we're seeing even the life cycle even of strategists. Like a strategy of like a blue chip company like years ago would be 5 to 10 years. They'll go, we're going to build, this is our 10-year roadmap. And now that's becoming shorter and shorter, because the world is changing. The profiles of customers, how customers are engaging with products and services is changing. This on-demand culture we've created, people have less patience, right? Like customers want their stuff now. I order from Superbalist today, they must deliver tomorrow. If they don't, I'll move across, or, and I'll blast them on Twitter, So there's so many moving pieces all the time that I don't think learning should be any different. And I know it's a hard thing to grapple with, and I think particularly for those of us who are mid-career hires, who've been at it for a while, we were socially conditioned to see learning in a very different and rather very rigid construct, right? You should get your 3-year degree, and you should get, and there's a time, and I think there's spaces and industries for that, and then there's times, and I think in other spaces where we should be a little bit more flexible.
Definitely. I can strongly agree with the flexibility part of it. And I've heard it used a lot now, the phrase around AI. I've seen it used in marketing and a few other areas where people will say things like, AI won't take the marketer's job. It will take the job of the marketer who doesn't use AI. And I think that's the thing, is the integration. Very much going right back to where you started, the tech adjacency. And the integration of the skills. And I think maybe that's the value of education going forward, especially in the corporate, in the work environment, is how do we integrate it? How do we make it a little bit more diverse in what it offers, in what the potential is? Because we are changing so quickly, you want individuals to have access to what they need on the go as they need it.
100%.
Because unless that need is met at the pace that we're moving in, if you don't have that, your company isn't just standing still, they're moving backwards. And then it becomes that much more of a need. Then you don't have the level of talent that you need in the moment. You're not attracting the best talents in the market, because this is what people want. And data is showing that the biggest value people look for in an organization is, will I learn? Will I grow? And those two things are so deeply tied together that unless you have an attractive sort of learning system or learning platform within your company, then you're not really showing up, not just on a day-to-day, but you're also not cultivating that talent that you want to bring in as well.
No, 100%. I mean, a lot of people who are job seekers or people who are looking for opportunities, I think these are the pertinent questions they ask themselves. Like what value will this organization add to me? And 20 years ago, like that wasn't the norm.
Oh yeah, didn't ask that.
Did not. I mean, how dare you ask that? Question you need to ask is, why should we hire you?
Yeah.
That's the question. And I know, I think it really goes back to building the DNA of the company.
Yeah.
It's in the culture, it's in the how. How do we do things around here? How do we define investment in people? Without sometimes expecting anything back, right? And we understand the employee-employee relationship. By and large, it's a transactional relationship. We can't kid ourselves, right? Like I'm here at certain times.
Yeah.
I get paid on the 25th. This is transactional, right? Ina ete, give or take.
Yeah, this is the thing. Yeah.
And I guess the question is always, how do we then tap into both parties' understanding then what is the added value? So the added layer, so the fat around the meat that we've got to add to this transactionality of this relationship. For an employer, it's how do I curate a space where you best self-actualize?
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. So, and an employee is going, how do I best self-actualize and be able to show up as the best version of myself and co-create the best version of IP within my role, within my department. And when you mash these two things, it is utter magic.
It is.
It is utter magic.
Absolutely. And this is the exact same conversation that we have around the various generations we've got. I mean, now the average corporate workplace has got about 5 generations.
Yeah.
We've got now a huge flux of Gen Z that's come in, and our Gen Alphas are getting ready at the door, about to enter. And so you've got all of these different interpretation of what the world is, of what the learning journey looks like, of what the skill set that is needed for the future is, but also how I want to show up. I was working with a huge media agency not too long ago, and we were sitting in this workshop, and the only Gen Z they had in the team, it was the HR team. And she sat in the room and everyone went, oh, she's absolutely amazing, but she's always the person that's asking, but why should I do that task? But is that really the best thing for us to be doing right now? And you could just see the frustration in the room. And this is the thing. But I loved what you said, because this is the exact same type of approach. It's an understanding of the key value that each and every individual brings into the process, into whatever we're trying to drive, but also into the learning journey.
Yes.
And when you split it the way that you did, I thought that was extremely profound. That the employer or the organization is the understanding of how that building out the learning journey helps the organization to grow, helps the leader to grow, but also how it helps the individual to self-actualize. But also when you are a self-actualized version of yourself, then you blow the lights out.
You do,
right?
You really, really do.
Yeah.
And I think for me, and I think it's always a thing I say to clients and leaders is, we need to place a higher currency on the creative quotient. When people feel creative, they can problem solve better. Creativity requires psychological safety. Definitely. It requires a certain kind of environment that inspires that. And so, the more rigid you are, and you've got, and you throw policy at every problem, the less reluctant your people are to bring you their best ideas. But I think, the more of an environment you create where you say, you know what, like, let's just whiteboard stuff out, guys. Like, honestly, like, no judgment. Or, you know what, I'm going to set up a suggestion box. Yeah. Okay, right outside my office or whatever. Just drop, like, look at a business problem around here, right? Give me 2-3 solutions. You don't have to write, we don't have to know who it's from, right? Type the thing up, put it in the thing, and, and let's just see what comes out. And you would be amazed. And this is why, and it's one of those things we lose from being kids the more we grow up, because the social engineering then kicks in. Yeah. Like you watch little kids and they'll draw a picture and they'll say, this is the lion. And you're like, where is the lion? Like, this is the lion, and this is the elephant, and this is the jungle, and this is Mickey Mouse, and you're like, I see like scribbles, right? But like, that creativity, that magic we lose as adults. Yeah. And the only way to gain it back is creating spaces that foster freedom of expression, right? Whether it is in team meetings, in how we help people self-regulate, even things are conflict, like how do we respond when creative ideas are butting heads? Is it that the pendulum swings where whoever's the most senior? Yeah. Because if then that's the case, and you've created that perception that it's only Andisa's ideas that are acceptable, so I actually won't bother with mine. So I'll just come to the meeting and take notes, and if I'm on, I'm going to say nothing from my side, thank you, and unmute myself. You know what I mean? So creativity, I think, in the world that we live in, and I think particularly with tech. I mean, I said I've built now 2 different platforms. I've had to throw away my mental models and go, okay, Andisa, forget what you know. If you were the end receiver of such a product, how would this make you feel? How do you want to navigate the maze of the platform? Where do you want to click first? When is your drop-off rate? So think of the most difficult, or when you're trying to make a purchase and you don't make it to checkout because that platform was just so difficult to navigate. Yeah. So the maze of this thing you've created, what's the complexity of it? And once you figure that out, you go, okay, so let's strip back the layers and let's make this as easy as possible and as pleasant as possible. So, so as much intuition there is. I mean, no one taught us how to use WhatsApp. We all went and downloaded it, and then we're all posting stories.
Some of us had Mixit to practice.
Oh, sure, BBM. Oh my gosh, yes. No, we had BBM, we had Mixit, we had the whole jazz. But I mean, by and large, I mean, like TikTok came out, and the evolution of TikTok is incredible. TikTok started out as a platform for kids, for them to post like videos, to what it is now, where people now will wake up and go, if I want to hear the news or Google something quickly, I can just go to TikTok because I follow certain people, or however your algorithm is set up. But I mean, that was intuitive. You could navigate the maze of TikTok without an instruction handbook. Yeah. And the question for organization is, how do we set up a structure or learning pathways that don't always require L&D and HR to craft out a 100-page instruction handbook? That's the question. Yeah. And so are we building for purpose, or are we building for the sake of building and being cool, or we're competing with Google, or we heard Amazon's doing this, or whatever have you. So if we're a whatever little company and we do X, how does learning look like for us? So what is the thing that's in our DNA? What's going to make this tick? That if we went and launched this thing, the uptake would be high because it's intuitive, it's easy, it feels familiar, there's a sense of familiarity to it, but I can easily navigate the maze of learning, and I can learn, I can ingest information, and even better, there's pods where I can go and pour back that wisdom either to my colleagues or projects that I'm working on. And so it's really building an ecosystem that's fit for purpose.
Yeah, and also opens up for the user journey or the user experience to inform and help iterate the process, right? You spoke about TikTok. Facebook was the same.
Yeah,
I mean, Facebook was started off for not the generation that ended up using it at the time. I mean, now probably gone back to that same generation, but a different generation, just to help everyone to keep touch and after school. But now you look at how that evolution has happened, but that type of thing happens through the user journey, being able to inform how we then build. And for me, what you're saying also is, let's co-create it.
Yes.
Let it not just be a one-sided building of a platform that we believe from just our personal journeys will work, but also how do we bring the people that are intended to use this particular platform, jump onto this experience, to do it, to be a part of it, and to build it with us. So experience is a very, very big part of that.
Experience, I think for me also, diversity in the profiles of people who engage with the platform. I mean, even like the platform we're working on now, my helper of 15 years, I think she's got a grade 7 or grade 8. Yeah. If I want to stress test an idea, I'll give her access to it, and I'm like, can you see if you can just? I mean, we've taught her some kind of digital literacy, but I mean, she's older, she's nearing 50, and I'm like, if she struggles with it, then I have to go back to the team and say, hey, so I did a bit of a test at home. So I tested on my 13-year-old, my 17-year-old, and on a 55-year-old, and these were the 3 responses. This is how long it took for the 13-year-old to get around to the 17-year-old and the 55-year-old. And if you can't find a medium, and I mean these people are all very different generations, the kids and her, then there's a fundamental problem, and then there's a shift in something we need to do in the system to inform a better user journey. Yeah. And so I think we take for granted that sometimes, yes, we might have very technically astute people who get paid handsomely well to know how to do their jobs, but ultimately, it's the human interface with the platform that will matter the most. Yeah. So we've got great developers who are very creative, and they'll build, wonderful infrastructures. But if those infrastructures are too difficult to permeate, then it becomes almost a zero-sum game. So we've spent millions or billions into a platform, and then the uptake is really low, which I think we see a lot. And similar, I think, to wellness programs. Like EAPs are tapering down, executives are frustrated. We've spent, however, and there is no uptake, but we're seeing, mental wellness, is rising up, but we've got EAP programs that people don't access for whatever reason. Is it a culture shift that's needed? Is it the platform itself? Is it on the other end? Is the help that's available not what's required? And so we don't ask ourselves the right questions. And I think it's important when you build something to ask yourself, who are you building it for?
Exactly.
And how would it impact and shift the needle in their life? And if we can't answer that, so for me, and like working now on this like youth thing, I'm like, if my 13 and 17-year-old can't navigate this thing easily, then it's too complicated. And that's kind of it. And that's it. It's really too complicated. And so the easier the 13-year-old can navigate through the maze of, okay, I'm gonna upload a CV. So I'll give him a task and say, search for this job, attach this document, which is your CV, do this, do this, do that. And if you can't get through that 10-step program within a certain amount of time, we've built something complicated. And a part of it is also taking your ego out and going, okay, maybe we don't have it right now.
For sure.
Maybe we need to take a breather, take our foot off the pedal, and then regroup. And so, I mean, we've been at it for like 18 months, and it's been regroup after regroup, and it's just stress testing with different audiences. So young, old, black, white, Indian, colored, whatever it is. So because we've also have to take out our own unconscious biases. I am very aware of my privilege as a black middle-class woman. I'm very aware of it. And so I'm very aware also that when I build stuff, subconsciously, my privilege enters the chat.
Always.
It always does. Always. So we can't be naive, I think, to some of those realities.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that that's a very big part of it, a very, very, very big part of it, especially as we build for diverse audiences. And one of the things you mentioned is understanding the audience you're building for. Dan Pink, who does a lot of work around employee motivation, says the best way to motivate a team, a group, an organization is to find out what's already motivating them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a great place to start with the learning journey as well, is to find out how people are already consuming, how are people already learning. So getting those insights and then allowing the insights to inform the building. And then, like we said, building the plane as you fly it, and just literally going on that journey and taking everyone on the journey with you. What I found with a lot of organizations and leaders, that there is this halo effect of us also as leaders expecting ourselves to be the saviors, to have this kind of savior mentality and association. But the truth of the matter is, everyone, regardless of where they are in a company, understands that everyone is just making it up as they go. And so when we can take our teams along on the journey with us to say, hey guys, this platform is brand new, we're all building it together, let's go. Let us know what's working. Let's understand some of these insights and then use that to move ahead. Then everyone jumps on the journey, but there's also more of an openness, a curiosity, and people are a little bit more forgiving as well when things break and things don't quite work out. Final question.
Yes.
We have run out of time. Final question is, if you had to rebuild the L&D function from scratch, so the learning and development function from scratch, what's one key change that you would make?
I would completely take out the old mental models on what learning is and what learning needs to look like. And I would start from zero. I wouldn't start from experience. I would start from zero. And there's a difference between those two things.
Okay, say more about that. I want to hear that. There's still one thing. I know. This sounds so good. Okay, quickly.
Okay, very quickly. So experience is essentially what would become my hindrance in terms of falling back into old patterns. Starting from zero is being completely open to alternative thinking and something that I don't know. And for me, if I was an L&D leader, that will probably be leaning on to a lot more people who are either younger or otherwise who are naturally in a path of constantly learning, but learning alternatively. being conscious of my biases and how I was socialized to learn as a leader. So I would not start from experience, I would start from zero.
That I like, because it aligns so beautifully with this conversation, what we do at the Unlearners, and it's just that awareness, right? Bringing that in, but then also starting from zero. I love that.
Yeah.
We should put that on a t-shirt and monetize.
Right? I like that.
I love that. Andisa, thank you so much. Hey?
This is good.
It's been such a pleasure, and I can't wait to continue to watch your work grow and to watch you make a deeper impact, because I can tell just how passionate you are about this work.
Yeah, I really am.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Guys, that wraps up the conversation as part of this episode of the Unlearners podcast. And we've had the absolutely phenomenal, the story you told at the beginning, I think is just going to be stuck in my mind, Andisa, like literally the entire time. And please definitely do go ahead and check out Iana Consulting and have a look at the work that they're doing, how you can support, how you can be a part of the phenomenal shift that they're making and the support. You mentioned 2 NPOs already. Can we just have the quick names of each one, just so people can go and have a look?
Sure. The smallest baby I will announce on social media soon. I'm so protective over her, but she's growing nicely. She's growing very nicely. But the other one is Women's Tech Connection, and we support tech companies get access to top talent that we have been grooming through our partnership with Cisco globally. And so a lot of the women in our program are Cisco certified engineers. They've gone through all the lab and all the vetting. So if you are looking for female talent that is tech or otherwise tech adjacent, you might want to call us first before going to a recruitment agency. I'd save you lots of bucks.
Oh, nice. I love that elevator pitch. So practiced. Beautiful. Okay, thank you so much, guys, for joining us on this episode of the Unlearners podcast. Keep learning, changing, and growing. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.
The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow. Learn, change, grow. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow.